Night Terrors issue 4, Joshua Williamson writing with Stefano Nisi, Casper Wingard, and Giuseppe Camunculi on the art. So, not the conclusion. As Matt found out.
Yep.
When he read it. But yeah, where does this lie? I think the basic structure of this issue is perfectly fine. I think it's better than last issue. But I wouldn't say that it turns my mind on it, by the end.
No,
I still feel kind of lukewarm in the whole thing.
Yeah, it still does that fun thing with a different introduction by Deadman. So that's a benefit or a bonus. I think I liked early on. I liked that it was a simple goal. It was Robin, Sandman, and Deadman and Batman going into Arkham Tower and be like, we have to find his body, because that's a very it's a very Freddy Krueger thing. So we have to find we have to find his body to stop all this from happening. Like that setup was fine. Them walking about the creepy halls that aren't all nightmare. They're all perfectly clean. Damien even falling asleep for a moment because he's manually just keeping himself awake. All those beats I think were fine. I think where it falls down is when they actually get to him, and then so obviously I would have literally wanted anything else to be his origin than the origin that we got.
Well, we knew, because he said before, there was a tease before that he hated the Justice League, right? So it's okay, so something happened to him that was Justice League's inadvertent fault, right? And he comes home in this flashback, right? Deadman goes into his brain, sees this flashback, and this guy comes home, he's wearing a Justice League t-shirt, and he says to his family, the Justice League's fighting some bad guy or some evil Batman down the streets, which I guess means we're doing metal, or one of the metals. And he's like, hey, they told us we should evacuate, but I think we'll be fine. And then literally seconds later, the building is reduced to ash because something hits into it. And then he's upset because his family's all dead. And all I could think was, I realize you probably wouldn't have had time to do anything, but the way you came home as if it was a casual day of coming home from the office and said, the Justice League are fighting some bad guys down the street. I'm sure we'll be fine. I feel like he was kind of asking for this tragedy. Well,
it's that's not leaving during a hurricane and then being like, the hurricane destroyed my house with my family in it. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like in the DC universe, when a crisis level event is happening, they're pretty good at evacuating the cities at a certain point. I
mean, I'm not even thinking about it in a big picture level. I'm just going by what's in the panels in this comic. He comes in and says the Justice League are fighting supervillains down the street, and shrugs it off and just says, what's for dinner? And then is surprised when his building is demolished.
Do you think that's Williamson, though, trying to get on not the mediocrity, but just how everything in the DC universe is just, it's the Justice League up to some world-saving shenanigans. It's, what's for dinner? You know what I mean? You think that he's trying to make a commentary on that and just not, and being clumsy, or do you just think it's very clumsy writing to get to the point that his family's gone?
I mean, I wouldn't rule out that he's trying to make a statement with it. I think for me, the problem is that it immediately made me think this guy, even before he became Insomnia, was just an idiot.
True, could be.
So I just have no respect for him as a villain now, because I think he's lame.
I just, I know that he held the Justice League responsible for the death of his family, but I would have liked to be a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Open to interpretation. Was it really the Justice League responsible, or, were you not responsible in taking care? Something along those lines that kind of, it's not just they're responsible for the death of my family. I'm angry. I want the Nightmare Stone. I don't know. It's just it's a bit too simple.
Well, I mean, the Nightmare Stone came a bit later, because that was after the Lazarus Reign. The stuff, but because he was already in a coma, right? That's the thing, is he ended up going in a coma, and basically Insomnia kills himself because if you die in the dream, you die in the real world. So he does that so that he's not tethered to his body anymore.
He's out.
The nightmares bleed out into reality. And this all builds up to what Batman woke up and saw. It's just very convenient that Batman... Because we were really confused why Batman was waking up in the place that he started. And I guess he's technically not, but they were in Arkham Tower, I think, at the start of the story. So
I don't remember. But yeah, but you know, we kind of figured that out because Williamson did write the Batman one. So for him to end up there and we get to see that from Batman's perspective again, you know, well, not from Batman's perspective, but from a different perspective of Damian telling him that they lost.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Well, because everyone's woken up. Like everyone wakes up at the same time. At least all the heroes do anyway.
Yeah.
And the world's in the shitter. And it seems like, along with like the nightmares becoming real, a lot of the bad things from the nightmares come real. So the final page is Gunbat.
Yeah.
And
the Super Reaper from Superman.
Yeah.
And then whatever Diana snake creature from Wonder Woman. Night Terrors.
So,
you know.
I guess some of those tie-ins ended up being mildly relevant because the villain henchmen that were created in them are now in the main story for one issue. So yeah, Night's End is the final issue of this thing. Like we still have all the artists. I don't think it's as jarring as previous issues, and I think part of that is because the flashback takes up a lot more time this issue, so it kind of feels more natural to shift to a different art for that. So I guess that's a slight improvement, but I mean, at this point, we're kind of just like, oh, it's not complete shit. It's a little bit better. Like that's kind of the tone of which we're speaking here.
I mean, I still didn't like this issue that much. Like I thought it was fine. I feel like it's run its course, but I did enjoy the early stuff that did feel like a Nightmare movie, a Nightmare on Elm Street. You know, like the Damien falling asleep while going up the stairs because he's so like spent, right? And he doesn't even realize he's falling asleep because he's just going through the motions. I like that part of it because that did remind me of one of the Freddy Krueger movies. So it hit that vibe. I just wish it was kind of as fun as some of those movies.
Yeah, I think it also feels a bit weird that they've all woke up into this nightmare version of the world because Insomnia's done this. It feels weird to me that we're doing this cliffhanger right before there's only one issue left, because it feels like no matter what, we're going to rush the conclusion to this now.
Right. Like, I'm not going to be surprised if Dream from the Endless comes down and be like, yo, Deus Ex Machina this, you know? Like, what are you doing?
This reveal, this sort of status quo that's established at the end of this issue, it feels like that should be the end of, like, Act 1. So, if it's a 6-issue book, that should be like the end of issue 2. And then a lot of the story should be in this nightmare world, try to like solve the problem and figure out what this has done to the world and so on. But instead we're going to be wrapping up in one. I mean, I'm sure it's an oversized issue, but it's not going to be that long.
Let's see, I have it open right now for next week's books, so
it'll be a 48-page book or something like that. I'm sure.
Yeah. And that is a bingo.
Well, there you go. I mean, I don't know how much I've got left to say about Night Terrors at this point. I feel like it's a lot of the same complaints.
Yeah.
Insomnia has been a bit of a whiff of the villain. The general concept when it started was pretty solid, but I've just not really liked anything that they've done with it.
I really hate the concept of the Nightmare Stone. I just kind of wish he had the Lazarus powers of, you know, he got amped up in this dream. You know, he's able to cause, you know, the nightmares or whatever. But yeah, just the whole concept of the Nightmare Stone and then it being a dead man and all this other stuff kind of is taking a lot of the fun out for me. You set up this status quo early on where the entire world's asleep except a few key people and they're going to have to try and stop the bad guy. And you did nothing with that status quo. Yeah. You did nothing with this idea of like going through the world and like everyone's asleep, so you can get away with certain things that you wouldn't be able to get away with. You can, or you have to think about the safety of people who are just lying around because they can't run out of the way. Like they didn't do anything with that world they created by the end of the first issue, or by the end of the prelude issue even, because it was before issue 1. Yeah, the whole thing just feels like a bit of a whiff as far as like actually. And even stuff in like Superman where he falls into the ocean, it's like, well, what happened to everybody else that was like the pilots that had fallen asleep? Right, in the planes, like all this other more interesting stuff of how the superheroes, you know, in a world of superheroes, you would think like, oh, they'll be fine, and there was a way to tie that into his origin, right? Like you would think that Insomnia wouldn't, you know, or maybe that was his plan. Maybe he wanted to make everyone else have the same nightmares he had. Well, lose his family. There's layers there that could have been played with that just aren't.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. There should be thousands of people who have died in plane crashes because all these people fell asleep. But it feels like the book's just never going to mention that, as if it's never happened.
Yeah, it almost feels like they only took a 20-minute nightmare nap. You know? And everything's going to be fine. So...
That would be enough to crash some planes, though. Surely.
Oh, yeah. Some that are, like, on landing and whatever. But, like, you know... But yeah, just there's more like interesting concepts in here.
That said though,
get to.
That said though, regardless of what it feels like, Matt, it says in this comic it's hour 7 of the nightmare.
Yeah, no, I know, but I'm just saying, like, you know, I don't know, like the Zatanna book was pretty okay because she wasn't asleep, and we got a little bit of that.
No, issue 2 of the Zatanna book sucked. Issue 2 might as well have been a nightmare, but because she was just running around a maze being chased by a monster. It might as well have been asleep.
I should specify the first issue of that was kind of it kind of did that stuff, and then you know in the Superman book, the Aquaman, you find out that they didn't was that in the first issue or was that the second? I can't remember at this point. That they didn't get affected because of their pressure systems in their ears. Whatever caused the sleep wave didn't affect them because of their Atlantean physiology. So there's all these little things in there that they put into these tie-ins that, you know, overall I guess don't matter, but they're definitely more interesting than this Insomnia stuff. So, but yeah, it's a shame.
It's just not using I feel like this is something Williamson did a lot in his Flash run, and it's something he's just really guilty of. Is that he'll set up an interesting idea and then he won't actually use it to act like. Like the comparison I can give is that when you're making like a B movie, right, is you set up what the interesting status quo is for the characters to have to like deal with, and then the movie, the fun of the movie usually is seeing how they get around and say, I don't know, they're trapped in a mall and the robot security guards start killing everyone, right? So the movie's about trying to get out of the mall, and it's like try to like figure out and plot against them and figure out their weaknesses and all that. I feel like Joshua Williamson will set up something interesting, i.e. in this case, he sets up this world where everyone but a few people are asleep, and they have to try and save the world when there's no one around to help them.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, effectively, in the very next issue after they set that up, okay, wake up Wesley Dodds, right? Resurrect him to help. That's a really cool, interesting thing. But right after that, it was like, oh, we're just going to go to a lab. He's going to like mix a concoction, and then we're going to go straight to using it, and we're going to spend most of the issue in a flashback. And I feel like he just whiffs. Like he sets up a cool idea and then doesn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, I class him with like George Lucas, who's a great idea guy, not an excellent execution guy. You know.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need that person to help bring it out, and you know. But yeah.
All right, what are you giving Night Terrors for?
This is 6.0.
I'll go 5.
There you go. I almost said 6.5, but then I dropped it a half because I remember how annoyed I got. I read this on my one break I got on Tuesday, and I got very annoyed. That's how I spent it.